Hey everybody, today we are going to be talking about kombucha. If you've seen any of my other videos, you might have noticed in the background this and been like, hey, what's that weird science experiment looking thing that's going on the counter? Well, this is my semi-continuous kombucha brewing system. Kombucha is super easy to make at home once you get the hang of it a little bit. The hardest part really is getting the SCOBY started, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But let's get right into kind of the methodology that I use to use this as a continuous brewing system. So what we're going to do today is kind of do the entire process from start to finish. This batch is finished up and ready to be bottled, and you can see it's going to be super easy to bottle because of this spigot here. And we also have a pot of water just coming up to a boil right now. That should be hot enough. I'm going to turn the heat off. And I've got about 6 cups of water in here. All together, we're going to be making 12 cups. This container holds an entire gallon. We're going to brew a little bit short of that because we actually leave some of the last batch's kombucha in the bottle to help it brew. So to get started, we're going to go ahead and we're going to make our sweet tea. That's kind of what kombucha is based off of. I'm going to go ahead and add about 3/4 of a cup of sugar. You could add anywhere from a half a cup to a cup and a half of sugar for your 1 gallon batch. Just depends on how you like it. Let me give this a little stir and get that dissolved. Okay, and then for this amount, I found that about 8 tea bags is about the right amount. So I've gotten 8 tea bags. I've tied all the lines together here just to help them stay together and make it easier when it's time to fish them out. And we're going to go ahead and get that brew started here. And we'll let that steep for a little bit while we move on to bottling our previous batch. All right, so to bottle your kombucha, it's a great use for maybe some store-bought kombucha bottles that you have, or I really like to use these swing top Grolsch bottles, or some other beers come in the same style. You can also find these at a brew supply store. They make for a nice presentation, pretty easy to maintain and upkeep. And we're just going to go ahead and start getting these bottled. You can see, pretty easy to do that. I'm going to go ahead and hit pause while I bottle the rest of these. Nobody's that interested in seeing me fill a couple more bottles up. Okay, so I've bottled all of the kombucha from the previous batch. I've also fished out one of the previous SCOBYs that had floated down towards the bottom. Most of the time the new SCOBY will form at the top and they'll create layers as they go, and eventually that'll get pretty thick. I usually suggest starting and cleaning everything out every 4 or 5 batches, and then just finding the freshest SCOBY that you could find out of that stack of them and using that one going forward. Just thought you might want to see what they look like. So they just kind of take up the whole surface area of the tea, and it feels rubbery. Looks like a jellyfish. My kids think it's about the funniest thing in the world, and they like to play with it a little bit. I heard you can candy them. I've tried it myself. Didn't really work out that well. Anyway, there's a little bit of kombucha left over that didn't fit in the bottles. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to make one of my favorite cocktails with kombucha. So I'm just going to use a couple ounces of kombucha. We'll put a shot of tequila in. And we're going to go ahead and top with some seltzer. We give that a little stir. You could press some lime juice into here as well. Makes a really delicious cocktail. Yum. Good stuff. I hope you enjoy that. And I'll be right back. Okay, so we have now steeped our tea and made our sweet tea batch here. I need to cool this down because if I were to pour this directly into the old batch of kombucha with the SCOBY, it's going to kill everything that does all the work that's in there. So we need to cool this down, and that's why I only started with about 6 cups of water to start with. I'm going to add the other 6 now. So what I like to do is I fill up my measuring cup with ice, and then I'm going to top it off with some cool water until it's my 2-cup measurement. I'm just going to pour that directly in here. Okay, I'm going to do that again. And I'm going to let that come down to temperature. The last 2 cups, I'll just pour in separately. So we're going to let that cool off while we talk a little bit about SCOBYs. So I mentioned before that that's kind of the hardest part to get started is you have to get a SCOBY. SCOBY is what does all of the work and ferments the sweet tea into kombucha. SCOBY is actually an acronym. It stands for Symbiotic Culture of Bacteria and Yeast. And you can see I have one here floating. This is one that I've recently propagated. The easiest way to do this is to go to your market that carries kombucha and find unflavored kombucha, just raw unflavored kombucha. Look for on the label it to say raw or unpasteurized. And you might even want to look for that little jellyfish looking thing floating in there. I know that kind of grosses some people out with the kombucha, but that's actually going to make it a lot easier to propagate your own SCOBY. So you can go ahead and there might be some sediment at the bottom of the bottle too. That's also a good sign. So you could pour off most of that bottle of kombucha and drink it, enjoy it. And then the last couple ounces, what you can do is mix up your own cup or 2 cups of sweet tea and pour those last 2 ounces or last 3 ounces into that new sweet tea mixture. You want to cover that, but you want it to be able to get some air as well. So cheesecloth, or I've just taken a paper towel right under the rim of this mason jar lid. And then after a couple weeks, you should see this layer form on the top. It actually should start forming in the first week or so, but it's going to be so thin that you probably won't notice it. Just keep it in a quiet place. You don't want it to have any temperature extremes, and just be patient with it. You might want to try 2 or 3 different brands of kombucha if you're really trying to get things started, because not all of them will create a new SCOBY. I always try to, when I'm repropagating the SCOBYs, I do a couple different batches of it so that I'm sure I have one within a few weeks. And then once you're done and you have something that looks like this, you want to save this, and actually this is going to be used to brew your first batch. So you'll take this SCOBY out, you'll put that into your container along with a few ounces of that now kombucha tea that's in there. And then you're going to do all these steps that we just did today and pour that new tea over the rest of it. And as it brews, that new SCOBY will form on the top of the new kombucha. Okay, so I'll be right back when we go ahead and mix our new tea into our SCOBY and old kombucha. Okay, we're back. I'm ready to mix the tea into the kombucha. I'm just going to do a quick temperature check. And we're about 85 degrees right now. It's a little warmer than the brewing temperature, but that's cool enough where it's not going to kill anything. So we're ready to go ahead and add this to this mixture. I should add that this was green tea that I used. I've also brewed this with white tea. You want to use any unflavored tea to do this. Okay, not too bad. And then, like I said, we're just going to top it off with the last 2 cups of water. And there we go. Now you can see that SCOBY that we had in there is now at the bottom. It might float back up to the top or it might not. I'm not going to be too worried about that. Within a few days, though, I should see a film starting to form here. You can brew your kombucha anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks. Anybody who tells you that they know the exact brewing time doesn't know what they're talking about, because there's a lot of factors that go into how long to let your kombucha go for. Temperature is a big, big factor. I just keep mine kind of near a window. It's usually not getting any direct sunlight, but it's a decent temperature. This one went about 2 weeks. The great thing about using a continuous brew system like this is that you can taste it and gauge for yourself where the flavor is at. So you can just hit that into a little cup and go ahead and give it a taste. I know some people don't like it when it gets too vinegary. I don't mind it when it gets that way. Just means I'm going to maybe sweeten it up in my cocktail a little bit more. So brew this anywhere from like 1 to 2 or 3 weeks. Give it a taste every now and then. And also, the brew time is going to change the more times you make this. So what I mentioned before also is every 4th or 5th brew, you want to clean the system out. So what I do is I'll leave that little bit with the SCOBY, and then I'll pour that off into another container, and I'll clean this out. I'll actually break this spigot down because there's be some sediment in there. I want to clean everything out, put it all back together, and then pour my next batch in there. So try not to let it go any more than 4 or 5 batches. It gets a little gnarly if you go past there. I think that's about everything. I hope I covered enough. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comment section below the video. I'll do my best to answer anything that anybody asks me. But I hope you try this at home. It's pretty easy to do. It's pretty rewarding as well. And I hope you enjoy. So long.